For a journalist like you, how do you manage to stay on top of the news? Do you have field reporters out there? Do you have established contacts who keep giving you intelligence from the ground? How does it work in your journalistic field?
So it's a combination of things. There are people out there in the field who are collecting information, then there are press briefings, then there are people, as you said, contacts. You can call them and ask them. And also, for a change, a lot of my contacts, who otherwise would have been busy, are readily available now for maybe a video chat, for a phone chat. So this is also one of the pluses, I would say, of staying home, because most of the people are staying home, they are not traveling. So I'm not saying that this is easy. This is rather far more work than Elsa than when I used to work from office. It's more hours, and it's 7 days a week because Sundays,
Yeah.
Mondays, and so there is no excuse that it's your off day. So unfortunately, maybe for a lot of other professionals, it may be a time to relax, to reflect, to lazy around. But for journalists, it's far more work than usual.
Yeah, we were talking about that. So, when you're talking about your work, you're really on top of it. There are stories from all over India, about this, of course, missives from the government instructing us what to do. Local governments are doing their best. And then, of course, you have all the other people who are impacted by the decisions that have been taken. And you have to really stay on top of it. Do you think that during this time it's easier to actually get the news out, or are you finding that it's much more difficult?
It's much more difficult because we have the Pandemic Act in place, and in the name of that law, governments can suppress a lot of information which otherwise we would have claimed. So these are, I would say, uh, since it's a national emergency, it's a global emergency, then it's very important at this moment, especially for journalists, to not just collect information but also put it in perspective for their audience, for their readers, and also continue to seek accountability from the government. That's the most important thing, and I would want to highlight as the high point of this whole conversation, that continue to hold the governments to account, the powerful to account. Because what happens is the decisions which are being taken now in haste in a state of emergency, many of these decisions will not just remain temporary but will become permanent, and they are going to decide the kind of life, the kind of world that we inhabit tomorrow. So these are going to affect our politics, our healthcare system, our economy, and also remember our culture. So the world that we had before COVID-19 is going to be entirely different from the world that we will have post COVID-19. I'm sure a lot of us will survive. I would say most of us will survive. Most of us will still be alive. We will still be talking to each other, but on what terms? What kind of circumstances and situation and questions we will have after this period, this very important, crucial period, is going to decide the kind of world we inhabit tomorrow.
That's a very important thought, actually. That this is a moment of emergency of a very different kind. It's a health crisis, not a political crisis. And during this time, a lot of governments, not just the Indian government, a lot of governments around the world are putting in place measures which, on a normal day, would be undemocratic. But we all understand why, and we are in agreement. But your point as a journalist is, and which should also be in a democratic country, every citizen's, thought. Is this decision A, temporary or permanent? And second, um, how is it impacting my rights? And again, India has so many different layers. You have the very rich, the middle class, who are comfortably sitting and socially distancing at home. And then you have this whole layer that, social distancing doesn't work. These decisions have impacted them terribly. They are saying that the virus, they did not go abroad to bring the virus in, but why are they losing their livelihood? They don't have access to even food. I'm part of a food distribution network in Bombay, and every day we get more and more requests. So in these times, journalists have they are the fourth pillar of society, of a democracy, and they have an obligation on our behalf to tell the truth, to find out the facts, and to put forward stories that will help us hold the powers that be accountable. So thank you first of all for doing that work. And can you share a little more about the challenges that you're facing at this point
Right.
in
So,
doing that?
yeah, right. If you allow me, I will like to go to explain this a little at length, that how I see citizenry at the moment and why I think it is so important for people like me to continue to ask questions, to also go to the field while keeping ourselves safe and protected and try not to get infected. But see, please try and understand the character of citizenry. That has changed already in the last 5 weeks. We are calling this whole crisis a war. So the citizen becomes a soldier, not a citizen. A soldier without freedoms and rights, but only duties to fulfill. And this is exactly what we've been hearing in the last 5 weeks. Now, imagine India, in one India, there are several Indias. There is one India, which is an upper caste, middle class, affluent India, which have their kitchens full of ration. They don't have to worry about the food that they will be eating, at least for the next 6 months, I would say, or maybe 3 months at least, say. But there are also millions and millions of those people, laborers, daily wages. Their struggle is between their lives and livelihoods, and sometimes the line gets blurred. The livelihood itself decides if they're going to be alive or not. There are people who are starving. So I think the important thing at this moment is to remember that citizens are not soldiers, they are still citizens. Citizens, they have rights, they have freedoms and also duties. So when we are asking the citizen to be accountable for their actions, we also should not take away their rights from them. And this is exactly what I do on a daily basis. Now, you're asking about the difficulties that I face. The difficulties I face is that when I ask questions to the government, and there are very, very few people who are asking the question because they're saying, politics mat kariye, do not do politics. This is the time of crisis, of course, this is the time of crisis. But even the handling of this crisis, and to make sure that it is handled well and it does not impact more people than it should, we, people like me, need to ask questions. So now we are being told that we are anti-nationals because we are not standing by the government, and we are still being critical of the government. We are still asking questions, and this is a very small, very affluent middle class that's still feeling very safe and secure and have the privilege to social distance, have the privilege to work from home. Ask people who have no work and no home. So people like me, and the job of people like me is to stand for those, ask questions for those people of our governments who have no home and no work from home. So no work and no home, no work from home. For them, social distancing, first of all, they do not understand when their lives are at stake. They do not know what they're going to eat for the next day. So I think these are the very critical questions that I will, as an individual, as an Indian national, as a journalist, will continue to ask, and also on behalf of half of my country, on behalf of all the women who are at the receiving end of this whole crisis. Because remember, when there is food, so look at this family which has limited amount of food. Now the first portion of the food is going to the men, then it's going to the children, and then it comes and the women. So let's not get this out of your sight, that the most vulnerable people, including millions of our women, poor women, are going to be at the receiving end of it. So at the cost of being called a traitor, an anti-national, somebody who's not cooperating with the government, somebody who has their own agenda, I don't know what agenda they keep talking about day in and day out, I will continue to ask questions.
Yes, that's a really important work that you do, and because of that, you have been globally recognized. For your work. So thank you. I just wanted to highlight, in your TEDx Warsaw talk, you actually spoke a lot about this sense of identity and the slotting of people into boxes. And I think the whole dialogue now is who you are and what you stand for. And people tend to think that you're either this or that, and that there is no gray. And life is actually not about black or white, it's all about the grays. And you push back on that first, when you were growing up in Lucknow and as a young woman, and then when you started out as being a journalist. So can you share a little bit about this sense of identity that shapes you?
Elsa, I was thinking as a nation, we will come together because there is a crisis which does not see caste, creed, borders, as even Prime Minister said the day before, that it does not really see any of it, and it can impact anybody and everybody. Rather, I would say, the wealthier you are, the more well-traveled you are, the more chances that you have that you will actually contract the disease. Because as they said, passport walon ne बीमारी फैलाई राशन वालों को परेशान किया, which means the people who had passports, who could travel the world, they brought the disease to people who just had ration cards. So basically, making these people vulnerable. So what I'm trying to say is that the disease does not see this. But unfortunately, and I as a journalist was so tired for the last 6 years to cover this whole communal politics all around, this communal propaganda. And people do not really see you as a journalist as Indian national. They just see your religion. And I am not someone who wears my religion on my sleeve. And still, it's not good enough for them. I'm not saying people who do, they are, that I'm better off than them. But I'm just saying that I am not even someone who does that. But even despite that, the kind of hate and Islamophobia and religion-based attacks that I had to go through, that were on me in the last, I would say, 6 weeks, it's unprecedented. And trust me, I was thinking that I had kind of become very immune to all of this hate. I had developed a thick skin to this, and it doesn't really affect me anymore. But the moment that you think that you have actually kind of cracked it, then they go lower and lower and attack you there where you think, I don't know what to do anymore. I appealed to people, especially the Muslim community in India, especially in the post-Tablighi Jamaat propaganda campaign, that all of you, as somebody coming from the community, as somebody who's an insider, maybe I thought I had more credibility in the community than probably that what other people, other non-Muslims would have, or this is how it is perceived. So I, as somebody, a prominent citizen, I appealed to everybody in the Muslim community to cooperate with the government, to come out and declare themselves if they had any symptoms of cold, fever, etc., and said that this was the time for all of us to join hands together. And this appeal, this video appeal, was watched by several million people. So I'm saying, when it comes to doing that, I would do my duty as a citizen as well. I would forget about all political difference that I have with the government of the day at the moment, because this is a time of national crisis. But the kind of things that I am giving to the society, is this what I am getting back? No. There is more Islamophobia. Since last 3 days, you have an entire Arab world in storms, which are saying that this is unacceptable. Because this is not just within India that this is happening. Now, Indian nationals sitting in Gulf countries, they are writing Islamophobic, very hateful anti-Muslim posts, sitting, working, living there in Gulf countries. And remember, these are not democracies. So there are more than a dozen people who have lost their jobs as a result of these posts. And I feel extremely sorry, especially for those people, and especially for those Hindus, I would say, who have worked for several decades in Gulf countries, who have developed a very good image of Indians as very peaceful, hardworking, flexible people. And these handful of people, these few hundred people, are ruining it all. Not just for those people who have worked there for several decades in the Gulf countries, but also the relations between Gulf countries and India. And we should also remember the remittances that India gets from abroad. Out of 10 major countries, 5 are in just Gulf countries. There are 30 million people who live, 3 million people, I'm sorry, I think 3.3 million people who live in UAE alone. So can you imagine, this whole Islamophobic, hateful campaign is not just limited to India, just Indian borders, but spreading all over. So I'm quite worried whether the kind of world that we are going to inhabit post COVID is going to be more hateful, more violent, and there is some kind of a pandemic apartheid. And I shiver when I'm saying this. Some kind of a pandemic apartheid, at least in some pockets that we can see in India already happening, when hospitals are refusing to admit Muslim patients, when societies, very posh societies, are refusing to let Muslim fruit and vegetable vendors to come in. There are boards in Karnataka, in Telangana, in Madhya Pradesh, and in Delhi. There are boards which are up saying that Muslims are not invited here. So this is what we are seeing now. I hope all of this is untrue, what I'm thinking. I hope all my apprehensions are false and untrue, and we inhabit a better world than what we had, and this crisis brings all of us together. But I only wish and pray.
So there's a comment over here. Somebody has asked, Atif Zia has asked, what are the implications of an extended lockdown on unemployment and mental health?
Yeah, these are the questions that I keep asking every day. That you are asking us to bang thalis, we will bang thalis. If you ask us to light candle, we will light a candle. But these are the questions that we need to ask our governments every day. That the implications of the lockdown on unemployment, on mental health, I think it's already taking its toll. There is no concrete plan, Elsa, that I can tell you and your viewers at the moment, because I have not heard about this from our governments. There are only experts who are talking about it, who are saying that this may be the worst ever economic crisis since independence. But there is no concrete plan that is given to us that we are thinking about. We are only talking about coming to our balconies, banging thalis, lighting candles, or doing whatever else. I'm saying I will do all of this. But please answer these questions, these very important questions that concern millions of our people. Then these are answered. I will be the first one who will go to my balcony. I will bang thalis, I will bang pots and pans, will light candles and do whatever our governments want us to do. But please take care of all of this together.
How do you manage self-care, and especially during this time? Also, you're a woman journalist, so you get trolled a lot. I can see some of the comments coming in which are, not at all polite at all. I actually called out of somebody on, not somebody, I had also, in a minor way, not as much as you do or Barka that gets, but a few rude comments. And I said, you know what, you are free to disagree, you don't have to agree with what I say, but when you put your point of view forward, all I'm asking is you can do so politely. Why the hate? Why the rudeness? Why can't you accept that maybe we are on two different ends of an ideology, or uh, on the way we think about things. So, how do you manage this hate? How do you respond to trolls, if you do at all?
I don't know, Elsa, whether I've really been able to manage it. There are days when I just leave them altogether. I mostly do not read my comment section. But there are days when it really upsets me. And especially, I'll tell you when exactly it does upset me. So there are people, I know there are people from BJP IT cell, then there are paid trolls, and there are people who are inherently very biased. And the hate campaigns run on that we see on 24 hours news channels, it has real life consequences. There are people who used to be very nice people, who used to be my co-workers earlier, and I've now gradually I'm seeing them turning into bigots. I'm seeing them that how communalized they have become. They are still nice people, but it is just that they're being led into different directions altogether. And this dark side of their identities, the darker side of a human, because this is what leadership is all about. Leadership is about bringing out the brighter side or the darker side. I would say at the moment, Indians, by their leadership, are forced to bring out the darkest side of them, of humans from them. So what happens is that only a few weeks ago, there was that little girl, 13-year-old girl, student of class 7th or 8th. On Instagram, she tagged me in some post, and there was this Hindi slur that she used. And I'm so embarrassed and so ashamed. I can never pronounce it in front of you. I went to her profile and I saw that she was a student of class 7 or 8, and she lives in Bihar. I decided to interact with her. We spoke for about a couple of hours, and this was late in the evening. I had just come back from office. I was very tired, but I was so heartbroken to see this little girl being full of hate, because I think before she can hate me, she is the first victim of that hate that she has inside her. So I started talking to her, and I can tell you this good news that in a matter of just a couple of hours, I was successful in changing her perception about me to a great extent. She would still be skeptical about me. She would still see me whether I'm being good enough or not. She said I'm an anti-Hindu person and I'm an anti-India person, and she called me different slurs and abuses. But I hope that she doesn't do it anymore. She said, I didn't know you were like this. I said, I play Holi at my home. There is Diwali, which is celebrated in my place. My best friends are Hindus. I am not a Hindu hating person. It is just that I ask questions of the government. And also another thing, that I am born as a Muslim and I am not apologetic of my identity. Because for me, being Indian and being Muslim, there is no contradiction between the two. India is as much Muslim as it is Hindu. So when I make such assertions, people call assertions, these are just my expressions. So then maybe some people, it kind of unsettles some people, and their hate propaganda and campaign change young minds, like this little girl, 13-year-old girl, school going girl, who thinks such things about me.
In your TED talk, you actually gave an example about, when growing up in Lucknow, they expected you to wear a burqa, and which you resisted against. And then it feels like now people want you to wear a burqa, even if, it's like symbolic, right? And people are talking about Muslims as all of them being one kind of Muslim. So um, maybe you want to share a little bit about, these stereotypes that we are always trying to fight against, and you have several things. One is you're a woman, you're an assertive woman, you're an outspoken woman, so you fit and tick all the boxes that people like to hate against.
Yeah. So I grew up not in Lucknow, Elsa, but in Western UP, which is far more, I would say, raw culturally than the Tehzeeb ka Sheher Lucknow. This is more the Jatland that I grew up in. It's Western UP. My hometown is Khurja, which is part of Bulandshahr district. So the first 17, 18 years of my life I spent there. Of course, there were a lot of young women then who used to wear burqa, but there was never a pressure for my family. My family particularly was progressive. My mother used to wear burqa. She doesn't anymore, but she used to when we were growing up as young girls. But then there are a lot of people in my locality at the time who used to. But now, when you talk about these boxes, I think, these people who do politics based on identities and religion, for them it's very important to categorize people. And in order to categorize people, you need to put certain marks on them, like you need to categorize them and fix them into boxes. You say that, okay, Muslim men have beard and they wear skull cap. Muslim women wear burqa and they don't wear bindi, or they don't wear sari. Then you say, oh, Hindu women wear bindi and they wear saris. Then you say Christian people, they wear clothes in a certain attire. But let me just talk about Hindus and Muslims, because these are two major communities in India. And a lot of Muslims are also very visible Muslims. They like to lead their lives the way they think culturally, or they want to wear the clothes that they want to, and they should have the freedom to do it. And that is why when somebody says, oh, look, are you a Muslim, but you don't look like a Muslim, I do not take it as a compliment, because even if they're saying that I do not look like a Muslim, they are actually insulting my tribe. They're insulting my people. They're insulting those people who wear burqas. I mean, nobody should ever be judged on the basis of what they decide to wear, how they want to lead their lives. So coming back to the politics of identity, why they have problem with someone like me and why I irk them so much is that they cannot really fix me into a box. I am a Muslim woman who does not wear a burqa. I am a Muslim woman who wears a sari on my shows, especially, and most of the public meetings. This was early in the morning, otherwise I would have worn a sari even in your show.
Yeah,
So, and
I'm which she wears all these beautiful saris, and They are really, really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm someone who can think on my own. I do not really need men in my family to think for me, or not the least even the trolls, which most of them, 95% of them, are meant to think for me. I can think independently. I have my own perspectives. I have my own worldview, and I have a platform where I can share them. I think this is the worst combination for trolls, for right wing people who have very conservative worldview, for a Muslim woman to be so independent, so empowered that she does not just have her own opinion, but she can actually kind of influence opinion. This is what they accuse me of day in and day out. They say, अपने जमातियों को समझा के आइए, अपने जमातियों को बोल के आइए. So like jamatis are mine, they're not theirs. As if there are few 100,000 people who are members of Tablighi Jamaat, and all of them know me, and I know all of them personally. I hardly know even one person from Tablighi Jamaat. So this whole uh, kind of putting everybody in one box. There is so much of diversity even within Indian Muslims. A Muslim living in Bangalore would be so much different from a Muslim living in, say, Bulandshahr. I would have much more in common with my Hindu neighbors in my hometown than I would ever have with someone who lives, a Muslim who lives in Telangana, or who lives in Karnataka, or who lives in Kerala for that matter. So I'm saying this whole, we really need to acknowledge this diversity within the Muslim community before we think of them as a one monolithic group. Because it's also important for people who do hate politics to look at people as categories, not as people. Because the moment you know me as Arfa, as a woman journalist, as an Indian national, it is very difficult for you, Elsa, to hate me. But if you know me just as a category, as one of the 20 to 100 million Muslims, then it's very easy. When I'm a nameless, faceless person, it is very easy to stereotype me, to create biases against me. But when you know me as an individual, as a human, as a fellow Indian, then it's almost impossible to hate me unless I do something so obnoxiously wrong.
Yeah. So, did you always want to be a journalist? Because your brand is really about amplifying the common citizens' issues, right?
Elsa, we are made of our experiences. When I was a young girl going to school, my mother wanted me to become a doctor. Or some of my close relatives thought maybe I could have been a good teacher. But my mother specifically wanted me to become a doctor because in my entire town, there was not a single woman doctor. And she thought there was this need of a woman doctor in our locality because this is the best she could think of me. But I wanted something else. I wanted a bigger world for myself than that small town. I always had this flair for writing. I always wanted to talk to people. I always wanted to listen to them. I always wanted to talk, listen, read, and write. I'm sure I could have done all of this even when I had become a doctor. But this is not, I think, what was my best trait, my best characteristics. So I would say, if given a chance to ask me that if I can go back 20 years down the line, would I want to change some of my decisions? I would say no. This is the best I could think about myself, that even if I could go back, I would still decide to be a journalist. And this has been a very, I would say, a very humbling journey for me. Someone like me who comes from a small town. Now I'm a part of this major news organization, a good social media presence. When I think that there are people who have their trust in me, who think of me as a credible person, who trust my words, who trust the information and perspective that I bring to them. And I think this is just enough for this lifetime, Elsa.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.